What does it actually take to pull off the perfect crime? Not a mugging. Not a smash and grab. We're talking about a heist. A crime so bold, so ruthlessly planned, or so shockingly audacious that it rewrites the rulebook on what human beings are capable of when ambition, desperation, and opportunity collide in exactly the right way. Throughout history, certain crimes have burned themselves so deeply into the public consciousness that they stopped being mere criminal acts and became legends. They became movies, books, documentaries, and dinner table conversations. They became the benchmark against which every other theft is measured. And today, we are going to walk through 10 of the most dangerous and significant of them all. Some of these were pulled off in broad daylight. Some unfolded over long weekends while the world went about its business. Some required months of back-breaking physical labor. Some required one phone call to the right corrupt insider. Some involved violence so brutal that the money barely felt worth the blood spilled to get it. And some, despite the full force of international law enforcement, remain completely, officially unsolved to this very day. We are going to break down exactly what happened, how each crew pulled it off, what went wrong, and what these stories reveal about greed, ingenuity, and the razor-thin line between criminal genius and catastrophic failure. From a gang of pensioners drilling through a London vault to a dictator emptying his own country's central bank on the eve of an invasion, every single one of these stories is more insane than you think. What is striking, when you look at these 10 cases side by side, is how different the methods are. There is no single blueprint for a great heist. Some relied on brute physical effort. Some relied on insider access. Some relied on elaborate deception. And some relied on the exploitation of chaos so complete that normal rules simply stopped applying. But all of them share one thing. At some point, someone looked at an apparently impenetrable target and decided it was worth trying. That decision, and the events that followed, is what we are here to explore. Let's get into it. Number 10. The Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Robbery. 2015. We start at number 10 with a crew that, on the surface, looked like the absolute last people on Earth capable of pulling off a sophisticated heist. The year is 2015. It is Easter weekend in London. The streets are quiet, the city is half empty, and most people are home with their families. Meanwhile, a group of men, the majority of them in their 60s and 70s, are quietly loading industrial drilling equipment into an elevator shaft in the heart of the Hatton Garden jewelry district. Hatton Garden is one of the most densely packed concentrations of diamond merchants, goldsmiths, and precious stone dealers anywhere in the world. The safe deposit facility beneath the district stores some of the most valuable privately held assets in the entire United Kingdom: uncut diamonds, family heirlooms, gold, cash, and irreplaceable personal documents. The vault is fortified with reinforced concrete walls and a security system built to withstand exactly the kind of attack these men were about to launch. And yet, over the course of an entire long holiday weekend, this gang of elderly British career criminals bypassed the alarm systems, descended into the lift shaft, used a heavy-duty drill to bore through a reinforced concrete wall nearly half a meter thick, and then spent days methodically working through the safe deposit boxes. By the time the building reopened after Easter, they had emptied boxes containing tens of millions of pounds in jewelry, gold, and currency. The thing that makes this heist so extraordinary is not just the sheer audacity of the operation. It is the identity of the men behind it. These were not sleek professionals moving with the precision of a military unit. These were aging men with criminal records stretching back to the 1960s. Men who used mobility scooters outside the vault and industrial drills inside it. They were eventually brought down not by forensic brilliance but by their own habits. They communicated carelessly, gathered in familiar places, and behaved in patterns that surveillance cameras quietly documented. Most of the gang were convicted. Most of the stolen goods were never found. The exact value of what was taken remains disputed to this day. Official figures run into the tens of millions, but valuations of undeclared, unregistered assets stored in those boxes push some estimates far higher. The Hatton Garden robbery entered the history books as proof that in crime, as in life, experience and determination can count for more than youth. It is also a reminder that the greatest threat to a secured vault sometimes comes not from a new generation of digital criminals, but from men who have spent an entire lifetime learning how the system works, and exactly where it is weakest. Number 9. The Brink's robbery. 1983. Number 9 takes us back to November 1983, to a warehouse on the outskirts of Heathrow Airport. 6 armed robbers arrived expecting to steal roughly £3 million in cash. What they found instead changed the course of British organized crime for the next 2 decades. Inside the Brink's vault was not just cash. It was 26 tons of gold bullion, worth approximately £26 million at the time, and well over $100 million in today's money. The robbers had not known the gold would be there. But when those vault doors swung open and they saw what was inside, the decision was made immediately. They were taking it. The operation succeeded largely because of one man on the inside. One of the security guards on duty that morning was related by marriage to a member of the gang. He had unlocked the doors, disabled the alarm, and helped subdue his fellow guards under the threat of violence. The robbery took less than an hour. What followed was a catastrophe that unfolded in slow motion over the next 30 years. Because gold bullion, 26 tons of it, is almost impossible to simply sell. You cannot walk it into a shop. You need criminal infrastructure. You need people who can melt it down, restamp it, and filter it back into the legitimate market without attracting attention. That need drew the gang into increasingly violent relationships with organized crime networks across Britain. People connected to the conspiracy were murdered. Money was laundered through property and businesses. A significant portion of the gold was smelted and reintroduced into the gold supply, which means that some of those stolen bars may exist today as ordinary jewelry worn by people with no idea of its origins. Only a small fraction of the original haul was ever officially recovered. The Brinksmat case became one of the defining criminal sagas of 1980s Britain, a masterclass in how the successful execution of a theft is often just the beginning of a much more dangerous story. The case is still referenced by criminologists and law enforcement agencies as a foundational study in how proceeds from major theft flow into legitimate economies, corrupting businesses, inflating property markets, and leaving trails of violence in their wake. Stolen gold. Melted down. Restamped. Sold. And potentially worn as jewelry by people who have no idea what they are carrying. Number 8. The Dunbar Armored Robbery. 1997. At number 8, we moved to Los Angeles in September 1997, and the largest cash robbery in American history at the time. And the man who made it possible was not a career criminal. He was an employee. Alan Pace worked as a regional safety inspector for Dunbar Armored, one of the country's largest cash handling companies. His job took him through armored facilities across the region on a regular basis, and over time, he came to understand the Dunbar Los Angeles depot with extraordinary intimacy. He knew which security cameras had blind spots. He knew when guards changed shifts and how the vault schedule operated. He knew, in short, precisely how to walk inside and walk back out again with a fortune. Pace recruited 5 men he had known since childhood, friends he trusted completely. Together they studied the facility, rehearsed their movements, and planned for contingencies. On the night of September 12, 1997, they entered through a loading dock, controlled the guards without firing a single shot, and loaded cash into rented moving trucks. When they were finished, they drove away into the Los Angeles night with $18.9 million. For a while, it appeared they might actually get away with it. The FBI had almost nothing to work with. The cash was divided up, hidden, and gradually spent, on cars, real estate, and small businesses. Then one of the crew made the mistake of showing marked bills to someone outside the group. That person called the FBI. The network unraveled quickly. Alan Pace was convicted and sentenced to over 2 decades in federal prison. The vast majority of the money was never recovered. The Dunbar robbery stands as a permanent reminder that the most dangerous threat to any secured facility is almost always the person who already knows it best. Security systems are designed to keep strangers out. They are almost never designed to account for the trusted insider who has spent years quietly mapping every weakness. Alan Pace did not need to crack a safe. He did not need to tunnel through concrete. He simply needed to remember what he had already been paid to observe, and then decide to use that knowledge for himself. Number 7. The Banco Central Fortaleza Robbery. 2005. Number 7 takes us to Brazil, to the northeastern city of Fortaleza in the summer of 2005, and to one of the most patiently, brilliantly engineered crimes in the history of theft. Several months before the robbery, a group of men rented a commercial property a short distance from the local branch of the Banco Central do Brasil. They registered a fake landscaping business, planted grass outside, parked trucks in the lot, and made themselves look like a completely ordinary small operation in the neighborhood. What they were actually doing was digging. Over approximately 3 months, they hand-excavated a tunnel running roughly 80 meters, nearly 250 feet, beneath the streets of Fortaleza. The tunnel passed under at least one other building and came up directly beneath the reinforced concrete floor of the bank vault. The feat of engineering required to accomplish this without the tunnel collapsing, without triggering any of the bank's seismic monitoring systems, and without a single neighbor growing suspicious, was remarkable by any measure. On the weekend of August 6 to 8, 2005, they broke through the vault floor and spent 2 full nights removing banded currency from the storage containers inside. When they were finished, they had taken approximately 164 million Brazilian reais, around $71 million at the time. The theft was so clean and so complete that it was not even discovered until Monday morning, when bank employees arrived to find the vault partially emptied and a hole in its floor. Police found the tunnel. They found the fake landscaping business. They found very little else. Some arrests were eventually made over the following years, and some money was recovered. But several key suspects were found dead, killed in apparent disputes between the gang members over the division of proceeds. A substantial portion of the stolen money has never been officially accounted for. The Fortaleza Tunnel job remains a monument to what disciplined, patient, sustained human effort can accomplish, even when the goal is robbing a central bank. Think about what that crew endured. 3 months underground, in the heat of northeastern Brazil, digging by hand through earth and rock, managing the constant threat of structural collapse, disposing of excavated material without raising suspicion, maintaining their fake business cover on the street above while working in secret beneath it. Whatever you think of what they did, the sheer commitment required to do it belongs in a different category for most crimes. This was not impulsive. This was not reckless. This was the product of a plan that was conceived, refined, and executed with a level of sustained discipline that most legitimate professional projects never achieve. Number 6. The Securitas Depot Robbery. 2006. At number 6, we are back in the United Kingdom, and this time the crime involved a weapon that no amount of vault reinforcement or alarm system can defend against: the threat of violence against someone's family. In February 2006, the manager of a Securitas cash processing depot in Tunbridge, Kent, was driving home from work when his vehicle was pulled over by men dressed as police officers. He was told there had been an incident requiring his assistance. He was taken, along with members of his family, to a farmhouse. And there, the situation was made very clear to him. He would help the gang gain access to the depot the following morning, or the consequences for his family would be severe. Securitas Tunbridge was one of the largest cash processing centers in Britain. It handled currency collected from banks, retailers, and businesses across the region. The total amount held on any given night was enormous. Faced with a direct threat to his family, the manager complied. The next morning, he accompanied the gang to the depot and helped them gain entry under the pretense that everything was routine. Once inside, the robbers secured the staff with restraints, locked them in holding areas, and proceeded to load cash into waiting vehicles. They worked for over an hour. When they left, they took £53 million, the largest cash robbery in British history at the time. Arrests came relatively quickly. The ringleader, Stuart Royal, was eventually convicted and imprisoned. But the investigation revealed how extensively the operation had been planned, with detailed inside knowledge of the depot's layout, staffing patterns, and the timing of its security routines. Not all of the $53 million was recovered. Some of it vanished into a network of associates and intermediaries before law enforcement could close in. The Securitas robbery is a lesson in a simple and uncomfortable truth. No physical security system in the world can fully protect against a threat aimed at the people who operate it. You can reinforce the walls. You can multiply the cameras. You can add more locks and more alarms and more guards. But as long as a human being holds the keys, and as long as that human being has people they love, there will always be a vulnerability that no engineer can design away. The Securitas crew understood that, and exploited it with ruthless efficiency. Number 5. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum Theft. 1990. Number 5 is the one that remains completely, officially, heartbreakingly unresolved. This is the largest art theft in human history. And more than 3 decades later, not a single stolen work has been recovered. In the early hours of March 18, 1990, 2 men dressed as Boston police officers knocked on the service entrance of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts. They told the security guard on duty that they were responding to a disturbance call. The guard, young, inexperienced, and working alone, broke protocol and opened the door. Within moments, the situation was clear. The men were not officers. They were thieves. Both guards on duty were handcuffed to pipes in the basement. And then, over the next 81 minutes, the 2 men walked methodically through the museum. They removed 13 works of art from the galleries, cutting several paintings directly from their frames. The collection they took was staggering. It included works by Rembrandt, including his only known seascape. Works by Vermeer, Manet, and Degas. A priceless bronze beaker from ancient China. The total value at the time was estimated at around $300 million. Today, many experts believe the real figure would be considerably higher. The thieves were calm and unhurried. In some rooms, they chose certain works and deliberately left others. The empty frames were left hanging on the gallery walls. Those frames remain hanging today, by explicit order of the museum's board, as a declaration of intent to recover what was taken. The FBI has never closed the case. The museum maintains a standing reward of $10 million for information leading to the recovery of the art. Investigators believe the paintings passed through organized crime networks in New England and may have traveled internationally. There have been credible leads. There have been dead ends. There have been stories that surfaced and then evaporated. Various theories have circulated over the decades, that the paintings were taken to order for a private collector who has since died with them hidden away, that they passed through the hands of Irish Republican Army-connected criminals and were used as bargaining chips, that they are sitting in a climate-controlled basement somewhere in Europe, slowly deteriorating. None of these theories has been proven. The FBI continues to receive tips and follow leads. The reward still stands. And those empty frames keep hanging, arguably the most haunting art installation in the world, made entirely out of absence. Number 4. The Dar es Salaam Bank Robbery. 2007. Number 4 takes us to Baghdad, Iraq, in July of 2007, and into a country where war had dismantled almost every institution designed to prevent crime on a large scale. In a functioning society, the conditions that make major theft difficult, reliable law enforcement, functioning courts, stable government, act as a constant invisible deterrent. Strip those conditions away, replace them with armed militias and institutional collapse, and the crimes that become possible are of an entirely different magnitude. The Dar es Salaam Bank in Baghdad was robbed of $282 million. The method was brutally straightforward. It was an inside job. Guards employed at the facility simply took the money. But the robbery did not happen in isolation. Reports consistently linked it to militia networks operating within the fractured post-invasion landscape of Iraq, meaning the individuals who carried it out were not independent criminals motivated purely by personal greed. They were connected to armed organizations with political and military agendas. The stolen funds were believed to have been channeled directly into those networks to finance ongoing operations. The investigation that followed was severely hampered by the instability of Iraqi institutions at the time. International law enforcement could not freely operate in the country. Suspects were protected by armed affiliations that placed them beyond the reach of any normal criminal justice process. The full picture of who was involved, where the money went, and how it was ultimately used has never been definitively established. The Dar es Salaam robbery is not just a crime story. It is a window into what happens when the architecture of civil society collapses. War does not only destroy buildings and lives. It dismantles the institutional frameworks that make accountability possible. The courts, the investigative agencies, the public records, the functioning chain of command that allows crimes to be documented and prosecuted. In that vacuum, theft on a scale impossible in peacetime becomes not just possible but almost inevitable. The $282 million that disappeared from that Baghdad branch represents not just a crime, but a symptom of a much larger catastrophe. Number 3. The Antwerp Diamond Heist. 2003. Number 3 is what security professionals and journalists alike have repeatedly called the heist of the century. Once you understand what happened, you will see why that title is fully deserved. Antwerp, Belgium, is the center of the global diamond trade. The Antwerp Diamond Center is a building at the heart of that industry, and in its basement sits a vault containing private safe deposit boxes belonging to diamond merchants, collectors, and jewelers from around the world. That vault is defended by an array of systems including infrared sensors, seismic detectors, magnetic field monitors, and a combination lock requiring a 10-digit entry code, in addition to security personnel operating around the clock. In early 2003, a crew of professional thieves connected to what investigators later called the School of Turin executed a plan that had been months in the making. One of their key operatives had rented office space inside the Diamond Center building itself, establishing a cover identity as a legitimate diamond dealer. That cover gave them long-term, unrestricted access to study the building, its staff, its schedules, and its security systems from the inside out. Over a single weekend, the gang descended into the vault and worked systematically through the deposit boxes. To defeat the infrared heat sensor, they reportedly deployed a remarkably low-tech solution, a polystyrene foam board and a simple light source to confuse the detector's readings. When they were done, they had stolen over $100 million in diamonds, gold, and other valuables. Some estimates place the true total significantly higher, because many of the box holders chose not to fully disclose what they had stored, for reasons involving undeclared wealth and tax authorities. The gang's downfall came from a single careless mistake. On the road out of Belgium, they stopped to dump their garbage in a rural area. A local man walking his dog found the bag. Inside were food scraps and DNA. Belgian investigators identified the ringleader, Leonardo Notarbartolo, and eventually prosecuted several gang members. At his trial, Notarbartolo claimed he had been hired by a diamond industry insider to steal specific items as part of an insurance fraud. He declined to name who. The full truth of the Antwerp heist has never been publicly settled. Most of the diamonds remain missing, dispersed through the global diamond trade in ways that make them almost impossible to trace, given that the stones themselves were never registered or marked. And the question of who commissioned the job remains officially open. The Antwerp heist is a crime that was solved just enough to put a few people in prison, but not enough to ever fully explain itself. It sits in the history of theft as a near-perfect operation, executed brilliantly, undone by a bag of sandwiches, and still haunted by the question of whether the real architect was ever identified at all. Number 2. The Lufthansa Heist, 1978. Number 2 is the heist that defined an era. The Lufthansa job at John F. Kennedy International Airport in December 1978 was not just a robbery. It was the event that shaped the public image of organized crime in New York City for a generation, and the bloodshed that followed it lasted for years. The Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK regularly held large quantities of foreign currency and precious items in transit, collected from passengers and held pending bank clearance. On the night of December 11, 1978, a crew with connections to the Lucchese crime family, operating under the direction of Jimmy Burke, a man known in criminal circles as Jimmy the Gent, drove to the terminal in a black van, gained access using a vehicle already familiar to the guards, and took the staff hostage at gunpoint. The operation lasted less than an hour. No shots were fired inside the terminal. When the crew left, they took $5 million in cash and nearly $1 million in jewels. It was the largest cash robbery in American history at the time. What followed was a bloodbath. Burke almost immediately began eliminating the people who had been involved. One by one, men connected to the Lufthansa job disappeared or were found dead, shot in cars, strangled, buried under highways and in marshes. Over the next several years, an estimated 8 or more associates were murdered as Burke systematically cut every thread that could connect him to the crime. The bodies were often found years later. Some were never found at all. The FBI built its case against the Lucchese family partly around the Lufthansa investigation, but Burke himself was never formally convicted of the robbery. He died in prison in 1996, serving time for a separate murder. Martin Scorsese immortalized the heist in Goodfellas, where Burke appears as the character Jimmy Conway. Of the millions stolen, almost nothing was ever officially recovered. Most of the men who took it were either dead or imprisoned. The Lufthansa heist is the definitive story of a crime that succeeded completely, and destroyed nearly everyone who committed it. It is a portrait of a particular kind of criminal logic in which the greatest threat to a successful operation is not law enforcement, but the criminals themselves. Burke's answer to the risk of betrayal was to eliminate the risk at its source. It worked, in a narrow legal sense. He was never convicted of the Lufthansa robbery. But the cost was measured in bodies, and the story became one of the most documented criminal events in American history precisely because so many people involved in it ended up either dead or willing to talk. Number 1. The Central Bank of Iraq Robbery, 2003. And now we arrive at number 1. The largest bank robbery ever recorded in human history. And it was not executed by a criminal mastermind, a team of professional thieves, or an organized crime syndicate. It was authorized by a head of state. The date is March 18, 2003. The United States-led coalition is approximately 48 hours from launching the invasion of Iraq. Saddam Hussein's regime, after decades in power, is facing imminent military destruction. And on that day, something extraordinary happens at the Central Bank of Iraq in Baghdad. A convoy of vehicles arrives at the bank. A handwritten note, reportedly bearing Saddam Hussein's personal authorization, is presented to bank officials. And then, systematically and apparently without significant resistance, approximately $1 billion in currency is loaded from the bank's foreign currency reserves onto the waiting trucks. $1 billion. Driven away in broad daylight. On the authority of a note. The money was believed to have been distributed across multiple locations, some held as reserves for regime loyalists, some used to fund armed resistance, some simply taken by individuals who understood that the existing power structure had days left to live and made their own calculations accordingly. When coalition forces secured Baghdad and eventually gained access to the central bank, investigators found the vault had been significantly emptied. In the months and years that followed, enormous sums were recovered in scattered locations, behind false walls, buried in residential gardens, sealed in containers on private properties. $112 million was found hidden in barrels behind one of Saddam's palaces. But the full $1 billion was never accounted for, and a significant portion of it has simply never resurfaced. By any definition, this is the largest bank robbery in recorded history. Not because of the sophistication of its execution, which was minimal, but because of the scale of the authorization behind it and the total amount taken. No safe was cracked. No tunnel was dug. No guard was overpowered. A note was shown. Trucks were loaded. And $1 billion disappeared into the chaos of a collapsing government and an incoming war. It is the ultimate inside job. And it is a reminder that the most extraordinary crimes are often not the ones committed against power, but the ones committed by it. The Central Bank of Iraq robbery required no skill in safecracking, no months of tunnel digging, no elaborate social engineering. It required only authority, the signature of a man who, for a few more days, still had it. And when that authority collapsed along with the regime, the money went with it into the fog of war, the most effective concealment ever devised. 10 heists. 10 entirely different methods. 10 stories about what human beings are willing to do, and willing to risk, when opportunity, desperation, or pure greed takes hold. From the patient Brazilian engineers spending 3 months digging their way into a vault, to the elderly British career criminals drilling through reinforced concrete on Easter weekend. From an Iraqi dictator signing away $1 billion on a handwritten note, to 2 men in Boston police uniforms spending 81 minutes removing irreplaceable masterworks from gallery walls that still display the empty frames. What every one of these cases reveals is the same thing. That security, at any level, is ultimately a human problem. Vaults can be drilled. Sensors can be confused. Guards can be threatened. Insiders can be recruited. And the systems designed to prevent theft are almost always conceived and operated by people, which means they carry all the vulnerabilities that people carry with them. Some of these crimes were solved. Some were partially solved. Some remain open investigations. And some, like the Gardner theft, may never be fully resolved. What we are left with is a series of stories that are equal parts criminal history, human psychology, and genuine mystery. Reminders that the line between audacity and disaster is far thinner than most of us imagine. If this video kept you hooked, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are plenty more stories where these came from, because the history of human ambition and human desperation is a very long one, and the heist is one of its most enduring chapters. We'll see you in the next one.